les doy la bienvenida a mis chicos de clase, a los que no conozco, a Roland, a Teresa, a Sina, a todos muy bienvenidos a este taller del día de hoy. Es la tercera jornada que tenemos, el tercer lunes que nos reunimos. Hemos ido viendo cosas muy interesantes, se han ido desvelando diferentes maneras de aproximación a entender la ciudad, a vivir la ciudad y analizarla para que se centre en sus ciudadanos, en su entorno. Entonces, me gustaría dar como que un breve resumen de lo que vimos en la sesión anterior. La sesión anterior se introdujo el tema del género, pero no solamente el género desde una perspectiva unisectorial, sino que se busca, o sea, que se nos presentaron diferentes maneras de ver la ciudad y entender lo que pasa en el espacio público cuando se hace con inclusión o cuando no se hace con inclusión, ¿no? Cómo varía ese sentimiento de seguridad, de cómo nos sentimos agredidos o bienvenidos en un espacio según nuestro género, nuestro bagaje cultural, nuestra historia, a lo que estemos acostumbrados o incluso el nivel socioeconómico. Todo esto afecta la manera, puede ser positivo o negativamente, la manera en la que vemos la ciudad y vivimos los espacios públicos. También vimos la presentación de Roland, que fue sobre el tema de la interseccionalidad. Es un poco de ver cómo propuestas urbanas, casos reales, han integrado el enfoque de género, el tema de la prioridad peatonal, el transporte público, las áreas verdes, todo pensando, todo esto se hila con la frase de Bakail, que fue con quien empezó Roland la intervención, diciendo que si quieres hacer algo para las mujeres, debes hacer algo para los peatones. Entonces ahí se relaciona un poco, ¿no? El tema de la peatonalidad y de la caminabilidad y el tema del mobiliario, equipamiento y todo en los espacios públicos para que todos nos sintamos a gusto, bienvenidos, no nos sintamos agredidos en el espacio, ¿no? Y sintamos que es para nosotros. Entonces, sin más, yo creo que he resumido así un poco rápido lo que hemos tratado. No sé si alguna persona del grupo quiere contarnos algo, preguntarnos algo, si perdió el hilo en la clase pasada o tal, está abierto el micro o el chat para intervenir. Y también decirles que la parte de las presentaciones van a ser, tenemos un invitado especial hoy que luego Roland va a presentar, que va a ser en inglés. Y en caso de que tengan cualquier duda, la pueden ir haciendo por el chat y si quieren también pueden preguntar en español y se les traduciría. Y bueno, de cualquier cosa, esta es una transmisión abierta, algo cercano, que no tenemos que sentirnos extraños, cualquier cosa, pueden sentirse totalmente confiados para intervenir. Entonces, sin más, le dejo la palabra a Roland o no sé si quiera intervenir Teresa primero, como ustedes vean. Yo les dejo la palabra.
Teresa, hablo yo.
Hola.
¿Sí?
Sí, haces la pequeña presentación.
Ok. Mira, muy bien. Gracias, Victoria. Voy a hacer una pequeña intervención hasta que venga Winston. Es una presentación que di en Brasil y no tuve tiempo de cambiarlo porque está un poco tarde Winston, pero no pasa nada. Y además es en inglés, pero no importa porque voy a hablar en español. Entonces, la última vez hemos hablado de los Integrated Planning Approaches, el enfoque integral de planificación urbana y también de las acciones en sitio, o el dicho placemaking o urbanismo táctico, que utilicemos a veces estas palabras para mostrar acciones rápidas en el espacio público para poder intervenir concretamente. Y hoy me gustaría exponer un poco sobre el tema de planificación con participación y el diálogo con la gente y el diálogo con los expertos. Y aquí abajo ven una foto de los arquitectos más famosos del mundo de los años, ¿cuándo fue? 40 quizás. Con Le Corbusier, con el Oscar Niemeyer y estos arquitectos más importantes que hicieron sus proyectos. Y a otro lado, la planificación con la comunidad, que tiene un foco totalmente distinto, porque como podrían ver, son los arquitectos en su grupo hicieron sus planos y toda la creatividad, que está súper válido, pero también al otro lado se podría hacer algo con la comunidad e incluirlos en estos proyectos. Entonces, si la planificación tradicional, y esta es la planificación que tenemos en Santo Domingo, también que tenemos en Viena, en todo el mundo, la planificación casi es la misma, porque existe la zonificación que está hecho por los profesionales y hay poca información entre los actores. Hay las herramientas que usan o que usamos son totalmente viejos, porque la herramienta de zonificación urbana tiene quizás 120 años de existir, pero con la zonificación no se puede solucionar los proyectos o los temas de la comunidad, sino que esto son puros reglamentos de la forma, de la estética, pero no dice nada de la comunidad y de su inclusión o de su mejoramiento y regeneración. Entonces, es un proceso totalmente creativo, pero hay poca co-creación. Co-creación quiere decir que la interacción con la comunidad o con otras áreas de la ciudad, sino que es un diseño arquitectónico que no comunica mucho con los demás. Y si vemos al otro lado la planificación con la comunidad, hay mucho intercambio de información. Hay los talleres como la herramienta principal entre los actores, entre la ciudad y la sociedad, y se crea una visión como comunitaria o una visión general entre los actores y utilizando las herramientas de co-creación. Entonces es totalmente contrario a lo estático de planificación del momento, sino que es también involucra un proceso de una planificación. Entonces también hay como retroalimentación de diferentes stakeholders, de los actores diferentes. Y además, si nosotros queremos trabajar, incluir la gente y las mujeres y los grupos vulnerables, entonces hablando de género y de inclusión, tenemos que proponer algo de un proceso de planificación y diseño con la comunidad, porque la integralidad de las propuestas está facilitada solamente por este diálogo con la gente y con esta inclusión, porque ¿cómo vamos a saber qué las mujeres necesitan? ¿Cómo vamos a saber que los comerciantes necesitan. Entonces, es súper importante tener esta inclusión. Y en nuestros proyectos hemos trabajado hace poco en Bangladesh, en Dhaka. Es una ciudad muy grande y muy sucia. Dicen que es la ciudad más sucia del mundo. Y trabajamos ahí con nuestro equipo de Supervin. Empleamos 8 personas, arquitectos, sociólogos, antropólogos, diseñadores urbanos, y hablaron con la gente y los involucraron en ese proceso para averiguar cuáles son las necesidades de todos los diferentes grupos de la comunidad. Por ejemplo, los vendedores ambulantes, los vendedores oficiales de las tiendas, también de las mujeres, de los niños, de muchos grupos, ¿sí? También trabajamos en Dhaka, en Maputo, en Mozambique, en África Sur, donde con nuestro equipo trabajamos con las escuelas y hicimos talleres creativos con los niños, y también creamos una herramienta que es ¿cómo se llama? Sería un juego para niños, para crear sus espacios públicos deseados, ¿no? Su dream village, ¿no? Su espacio del sueño. Qué elementos quieren en el espacio público, y no solamente es un juego, sino que ellos también van a construir su propia maqueta para visualizar estas funciones, ¿no? Un baño público, una cancha de béisbol, o de básquet, y sombra, luces y estas cosas. Entonces, mira, estamos haciendo esta investigación sobre las herramientas de participación. ¿Y por qué lo estamos haciendo? Para tener respuestas rápidas a estos temas emergentes que tenemos en el espacio público. Temas emergentes para nosotros son las challenges y potentials, ¿no? Retos y las potenciales que tenemos en el espacio público. Y lo que necesitamos para lograr este diálogo son estas herramientas experimentales para el diseño urbano, que nos ayudan un poco de involucrar y de trabajar con la gente sobre estos temas, y por eso necesitamos ese diálogo. Y bueno, también tenemos que tener tenemos que tener una buena relación con ellos, y bueno, por este proceso no se puede hacer en unos días, sino que hay que acercarse a la comunidad y trabajar con ellos por meses, digamos, o 2 meses, algo así, y de involucrar también el sector privado, el sector público, y todos los ONGs y otros sectores o actores que están ahí también en el espacio público. ¿Y cómo lo hacemos? Tenemos que entender la planificación como un proceso que es muy dinámico y no es estático. No es como los arquitectos que tengan su obra y tener su solución, sino que es muy distinto. Es un proceso largo, que vamos a también escuchar de Winston, que en ese proceso que dura años a veces de transformar estos espacios públicos. Y nosotros como arquitectos nos presentamos como moderadores de ese proceso y al final quizás vamos a diseñar también, pero estamos un moderador de este proceso de transformación urbana. Y también necesitamos una burocracia creativa. Entonces necesitamos gente como Sina, por ejemplo, o Victoria, que trabajan en el ayuntamiento y que pueden facilitar este proceso. Porque si el ayuntamiento no tiene interés de tener este proceso creativo con la comunidad, no va a haber ningún proceso comunitario. Entonces es sumamente importante tener también dentro del sistema del ayuntamiento y de la dirección de planificación urbana la gente que tiene esa creatividad. Y bueno, creo que el corazón de este proceso creativo es hablar con la gente y utilizar su saber, su experiencia en el espacio público para primero entenderlo y después reaccionar. Yo creo que también las cooperaciones académicas, como la que tenemos ahora con la UNIBE, nos ayuda mucho de entender este problema, y también por eso tenemos a ustedes, los 35 estudiantes que van a trabajar la próxima semana con nosotros en Santo Domingo. ¿Y por qué necesitamos este diálogo? Porque queremos trabajar con la comunidad, queremos trabajar con ellos, que ellas nos digan qué vamos a hacer, y no solamente informar sobre el proceso, porque lo que pasa en muchos casos, y también aquí en Viena, que planificación y participación solamente significa, ok, vamos a informarlos un poco de lo que pasa, y lo tienen que tragar, pero no preguntamos mucho lo que ustedes quieren. Y hay que trabajar con esta metodología que vamos a presentar hoy, quizás hoy un poco, pero en Santo Domingo, en el taller, cuando nos vemos en persona, vamos a presentar esta metodología y vamos a practicarla también. Y nosotros, en nuestro equipo, ya trabajó desde hace como 8 semanas en el campo, y está trabajando con la comunidad, y también ya encontró los multipliers, los multiplicadores de este proyecto o de ese proceso que vamos a necesitar, porque ustedes tienen que trabajar también con estos multiplicadores. Sí, y tenemos que saber lo que queremos, por eso con SINA hemos acordado de un sitio donde vamos a trabajar, y también con el Banco Mundial. Y así va la cosa. A ver. Entonces ahí voy a mostrar unas imágenes solamente de nuestro trabajo en Maputo, cómo trabajamos. Entonces, lo que saben, estos Urban Labs tenemos en Santo Domingo, en Maputo y en Daca. En Daca ya está casi todo listo, ya tenemos el diseño. En Maputo estamos en el diseño, en Santo Domingo estamos empezando ahora. Estos son los barrios informales de Maputo. Como lo ven, súper desordenado, puede ser como cualquier asentamiento informal, y atrás lo ven la ciudad formal también con las torres y los edificios modernos. Entonces, trabajamos en el marco del Maputo Urban Transformation Project, es el proyecto de transformación urbana de Maputo, y nuestra tarea es de crear 20 espacios públicos en 20 asentamientos informales, donde actualmente viven 150,000 habitantes. Pueden imaginarse, es un asentamiento informal bastante grande y cada barrio que están organizando en barrios y cada barrio tiene su líder y tiene su organización y su estructura y cada barrio va a tener un espacio público como una centralidad nueva en el barrio. ¿Sí? Entonces, hubo una selección de los 120 espacios públicos que identificamos con la municipalidad y trabajamos, aquí ven, y seleccionamos estos espacios públicos poco a poco, que voy a explicar cortamente, para poder hacer ese diseño. Entonces aquí ven el City Center, es el centro histórico de Maputo, y alrededor hay este gran asentamiento informal. Entonces nosotros aplicamos nuestra herramienta, nuestra metodología de planificación en el diálogo, que es muy simple. Yo creo que no es muy distinto que a cualquier otro proceso tradicional de planificación. Nosotros hacemos un levantamiento de la situación actual, hacemos un scoping, estamos viendo quiénes están ahí, cuáles actores están ahí en el sitio. Luego estamos definiendo la visión y los objetivos junto con la comunidad, y también la action planning es la planificación, el diseño de las propuestas, y luego evaluación y retroalimentación. Entonces aquí ven cómo funciona el campo. Hicimos las entrevistas, un mapping, ¿no? Un mapeo. También hicimos visitas del campo y hicimos un mapeo emocional, o ¿cómo se llama? Un mapeo de percepción social. Preguntamos qué lugares te gustan, lugares que no te gustan y lugares que necesitan intervención. ¿Sí? Entonces aquí ven la selección, el proceso de la selección de los espacios públicos. Es totalmente un trabajo de urbanistas, ¿no? Y de arquitectos también. Por ejemplo, la accesibilidad de las carreteras y de las calles, accesibilidad del transporte público, los puntos de interés, etcétera, etcétera. Y así que acercamos a la selección de los espacios públicos. Y como ven aquí, aquí ven la red de espacios públicos, y ¿cómo se llama? El distance, ¿no? ¿Cómo se llama? Los 5 minutos de caminar y de caminar, ¿no? Caminables, y ven la distribución de esos espacios públicos en el territorio. Entonces, así que fue la selección de estos lugares y nada, eso estamos haciendo este proyecto. Tengo un video, pero no voy a mostrar. Lo voy a mostrar la próxima semana. Y aplicamos esta herramienta que ahí llamamos el Maputo Urban Lab, pero también estamos trabajando en nuestra caja de herramientas de Santo Domingo también, que vamos a probar estas herramientas para cada sección o cada momento en el diseño, ¿no? Por ejemplo, tenemos herramientas para crear la visión y los objetivos, y también tenemos herramientas para, por ejemplo, el diseño, ¿sí? El diseño interactivo. Y solamente voy a mostrar una herramienta que ya mencioné, la cartografía de percepción social, ¿no? Esto es lo que preparamos, un mapa, y preguntamos a la gente sobre los lugares que quieren y no quieren. Y así que hay estas 30 herramientas que no voy a mostrar porque vamos a verlos en la próxima semana cuando nos vemos, y unas imágenes donde trabajamos en el campo, con la gente, con los niños, y también trabajamos con los estudiantes en Maputo. Fue muy bonito el trabajo con ellos, y aplicaron nuestra caja de herramientas, y ellos hicieron su trabajo de análisis de la situación actual y también de la propuesta. Aquí ven en portugués, que es muy similar a español, como ven, y las propuestas de los estudiantes que nosotros vamos a tener como un guía de la intervención. Y aquí ven los estudiantes bastante, ¿cómo se llama? Satisfechos con su diploma. Aquí está Teresa, aquí nuestro equipo. Bueno, fue muy bonito. Y también nuestro equipo. Bueno, listo. Entonces, esto fue de mi parte solamente. Y está Winston von Engel, y lo voy a presentar ahora mismo, ¿no? Winston, I would like to introduce you. Hello, good evening, and good afternoon.
Hi, Roland.
Hello.
Good afternoon from New York.
Yes. So Winston von Engel is a dear friend of mine. We met 10 years ago, or even longer. I don't know. He is half Austrian, half American urban planner, architect, with a long history in the New York City planning department. And he made it until the top. So he's the chief planning officer of Brooklyn, which is a city of its own, and it's quite important position. And we are very happy that Winston is with us here in Santo Domingo. I also would like to present Sina del Rosario. She is former minister, vice minister of housing, or Sina, I think so, yes. She's just gone for a second.
Okay, I was vice minister of the minister of the presidency for local development and housing.
Oh, yes. Okay, great. And we also know quite long, 5 years ago or so. So when we worked in Santo Domingo, we worked in Santo Domingo Este, that's the East Santo Domingo, where we worked on a development plan of Ciudad Juan Bosch. So I'm very happy that Winston is with us. Yeah, Winston, great to have you here. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about your experiences and your work, what you have done in the context of transformation of street infrastructure, streets into, avenues, boulevards connected with recreational areas and so on.
Sure. I'd be happy to, Roland. And hello, everybody. Hello, Ms. Del Rosario. Nice to meet you virtually. And Teresa as well.
I have to present also she's managing the class, and she's the professor, is Victoria de Lancer, and she's also a great urbanist from Santo Domingo.
Excellent. And actually, I realized, Ms. Del Rosario, that you and I know someone in common, Claudia Herramientas.
Of course.
Right?
And Victoria also.
right, a colleague and a friend. And for those who don't know, Claudia was our senior urban designer at the New York City Department of City Planning, and she's from the Dominican Republic. So I prepared a PowerPoint presentation just to put you all to sleep, or hopefully not. But I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully it will be entertaining. If you have questions, please raise your hand or put them in the chat. And if somebody could look at, okay, now I have to figure out how to share my screen.
Open share tray in the middle of the
Right.
Of the menu bar.
Trying to figure out where my PowerPoint is. Hold on one moment. I wonder if I have to start. I'm looking. I only see window. Okay, we're making progress. Here we go. I hope that's it. Okay. All right. All right. Which part can you see? Can you see and now they're doing work outside my door. I hope that's not interfering too much. Let me know, because I can tell them to go away. Can you hear me okay, Roland?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. Can you see my screen? It should say New York City streets.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So hopefully it's just walking you through the New York City experience with streets, with streetscape, and how we've evolved over time in treating streets and how we look at them. So first off, who am I? As Roland already introduced me, I'm an urban planner. I work and live in New York City, and my family is from Austria as well as from Germany. I started my professional career at the Department of City Planning in New York City in the Brooklyn office, first as a planner for several lower income neighborhoods in Brooklyn, and then as the deputy director of the office for Brooklyn. And in 2014, I became the head of that office. And our office is about 20 urban planners and urban designers working for Brooklyn. And our office is part of a larger agency, the planning department. We have a new director because we have a new mayor. He is a former city council member, Dan Gorodnik, and you can see a picture there of some staff members before the pandemic when we were doing a planning exercise in our office where we were basically brainstorming on our own. Our department is about 300 people, and we have different divisions that concentrate on different aspects of urban planning in New York City. And some of the day-to-day work that we do is we conduct studies on land use, on zoning, for economic development. We study our own population. We were actually very good at that, particularly. And we also manage the public review process for changes in land use. So when somebody wants to build a different kind of a building than what the zoning allows, we review those applications and then submit them for the public to decide. Okay. A bit of an overview of New York City. We're made up of 5 main city pieces. We call them boroughs. And many of you are probably familiar with New York City. We are now at a population peak of over 8.8 million people, despite the pandemic. For the first time in decades, New York City actually grew faster than the rest of the country. And the fastest growing borough was actually Brooklyn at 9.2%. But just to give you an idea, the population of Brooklyn is now at the same level that it was 70 years ago. So we're only catching up to the losses in population in the past 70 years. Other boroughs like Queens and the Bronx and Staten Island have actually exceeded their prior peaks. New York City is, or Brooklyn particularly, has a population of over 2.7 million. We're fairly mixed of white, black, Asian, and Hispanic. And we're made up of many different neighborhoods, from high density in our downtown section, downtown Brooklyn, and high rises along the waterfront with the East River opposite of Manhattan, to relatively low density in the southern parts of Brooklyn. And New York City is also a city of immigrants. Over a third of our population is born outside of the United States. And immigrants are dispersed throughout the city. And you can see that the darker the color, the more people who've lived outside or been born outside the country are living there. And we cherish immigrants. They're our economic lifeblood. They provide us with services, ideas, and energy. And some of our largest immigrant groups are, among others, particularly people from the Dominican Republic, as well as China and Mexico. And probably many of you have been to New York or have relatives, know of people who have relatives in New York City. And you can see that each immigrant group tends to concentrate in one particular part of the city. And that's often just because of affinity, family members, friends, and services that address the needs of those countries or immigrants from those countries are available in certain areas more than in others. So a little bit about New York City's highways. And you can't talk about New York City's highways without talking about one man by the name of Robert Moses. And Robert Moses was called a master builder. He was responsible he was an urban planner and builder who worked for the public sector from the 1930s up until the 1970s. And he was responsible for an astounding number of projects throughout New York City. Many housing developments, including the one that I am living in now and talking to you from now, are a result of his work. Hundreds of parks and public buildings like the United Nations, Lincoln Center, the Opera, but most importantly, or also importantly, almost every single highway in New York City and bridge or tunnel was built by Robert Moses. And this is an image from a very critical book on Robert Moses that illustrates all the work, his imprint on the city. And if Robert Moses had had his will, there would be a lot more highways in New York City. And it was only after a while of and significant opposition that not every highway project that he had envisioned, that you can see in the image on the right in the dotted lines, was realized. And so even though we're a city of 8.8 million people and growing, we actually have very few highways. But the ones that we have often had a very large, often very negative impact on our city and our neighborhoods. Most infamous, controversial of all the highway projects of Robert Moses was the Cross Bronx Expressway. And maybe many of you actually know about this, because the Bronx is actually a central point for many immigrants from the Dominican Republic live. But this was a highway that was built through a dense neighborhood to connect the interstate highway system coming from the continental United States across the Hudson River and going up to New England. And this is an image of it there in the middle. And you can see there on the left an image of what the Bronx used to look like in 1951. Densely built up with apartment buildings, some of these blocks were some of the densest neighborhoods in the United States. And then on the right, you see an image of where the highway went through, and you can imagine the destruction that that highway caused. It separated these neighborhoods on either side. It dislocated tens of thousands of families, so tens of thousands, even more people were displaced. And many people say it was the downfall, the beginning of the decline of the Bronx started there. And here are some images of what that construction looked like through the Bronx, and you can see it tearing through the fabric of the Bronx. Here's an image taken from Google Street View of what that highway looks like today. It is a always clogged highway because of its constraints, size, and critical juncture between these two connecting points. A slightly happier story is the Sheridan Expressway, another highway that Robert Moses built. In fact, all of the yellow lines that you see on this map are Robert Moses highways. But the Sheridan Express, which is that yellow vertical line on the left, is a highway that was built also in the 1950s to connect the Cross Bronx Expressway, which is just to the north, with the Bruckner Expressway, which is just to the south. And you can see that there is another highway there that connects the two. So it's not necessary. It's not absolutely important. And you can see also its location next to this blue line, which is the Bronx River. There's actually a river that goes through the Bronx that few people actually know about. So because of this lightly used highway, our agency actually started a process to do a intensive study of this, of whether or not this highway could be turned into something like a boulevard and decommissioned as a highway, and to reconnect the neighborhoods on either side with the Bronx River through new development and new construction. Here's an image again of the area of the Bronx on the left in the 1950s, before the highway was built. You can see the Bronx River. It was an industrial area. And then you can see the highway there in 2016. Since 2012, after the city, I'll go through some of the steps, but this is what the area looks like more or less today. You can see the Bronx River in the foreground. You can see a green space, which we call the container, I'm sorry, not container, the concrete park. It is a former concrete plant that existed here. And you can already see some of the new housing that was built along the highway, but before the highway actually came down. And you can also see that there is still some roadway left, and as well as a railroad and a subway line that goes. And overall, the plan that my agency, the Department of City Planning, worked on, produced with input and feedback from the community, was one of reducing the size of the highway and turning it more into a boulevard, and to use open space and housing to try and reconnect and rebuild the fabric that this highway had originally broken. So here are some images. There you see on the lower right hand a view of what the area looked like in 2011, and then an artist, one of our urban designers, vision of what you could, if you turn this into more of a boulevard, how you could now turn this into more of a street rather than a highway or a boulevard. Here's some other examples how you could use this by narrowing the roadway. You could widen the street. You could create green scapes on the sidewalk and allow people to sit and to walk more comfortably. And so here's a view of the highway back in 2008. And then here's a view of 2021 with many of the new changes already taking place. You can see in the pink and the right image there, these are pedestrian safety islands. And you can see the new green landscaping that was put in alongside in the median, as well as on the side of the highway. And then in connection with this development, nearby this old unused concrete plant was turned into a park with access or ability to get to and close to the Bronx River. So the next story is actually, this is a highway that one of the few highways that Robert Moses did not build. It's the West Side Highway on the west side of Manhattan. And again, it's a story in regeneration. So this highway extends along the west side of Manhattan. You can see it's that yellow band along the river, along the Hudson River. And it was an elevated highway that was built in order to separate traffic from the industrial uses on the at street level, to allow trucks and trains and freight to easily access the waterfront without interfering with the vehicular traffic going north-south. And this was a great feat of engineering built in the 1920s. And then because of a lack of maintenance in the 1960s and 1970s, a section of the highway actually fell in, and a garbage truck actually fell through the highway. And for safety reasons, the highway was closed, and the city, together with the federal government, proposed a new, partially below ground, partially above ground, partially in the water, new highway along to the west side to replace this highway, this elevated highway. And this plan actually gained a lot of opposition. And the opposition was because people felt that we shouldn't have a highway separating us from the waterfront, that we shouldn't dedicate our waterfront to a highway, and that people thought that the money this multi-billion-dollar project, that the money could be spent on other things such as mass transit. And there was an option actually to trade in some of the money for the highway and use it for mass transit. And this was at a time when the city's financial situation was very poor, and it was believed that that money could actually help the city in maintaining its subways better. Eventually, because of the opposition, that plan for Westway was put aside, and instead the highway was replaced with what we now call an urban boulevard. So it is still a multi-lane roadway, but it has landscape medians as well as a ribbon of green along the water's edge and on either side of the highway. And this happens to show an image right at where the famous Highline Park passes by. It's had a transformational effect on the surrounding area by making it greener and more attractive. And here you can see some images there along the water with the new parks, as well as the piers that used to be used for large ocean liners and that are today used for recreation or other purposes. This is what it looks like at street level. This was a year and a half ago during one of the Black Lives Matter protests. Bicyclists took over the highway, but you can see the bicycle lane and the walking lane on the left side, and the vehicular lanes are where the bicycles are right there in that image. And then the parks and the housing nearby. The one thing I would say about this is that the density on the other side could be higher, and that it should have mandated or included affordable housing, lower income housing. This is purely luxury housing. This is some of the most expensive housing in New York City here because of the river views. Now, a little bit about New York City streets. So, to us, the gold standard of what an urban boulevard should look like is Broadway on the Upper West Side, the neighborhood that I actually live in. The Upper West Side is a very densely built up neighborhood of multifamily apartment buildings. At one time, it was an area in the 1940s and 50s where many intellectuals moved to because of the abundance of housing, of rental housing, and the ability to rent apartments here, good quality apartments here inexpensively. And Broadway is the main street that goes through the Upper West Side. It is also the street with a 4-track subway line underneath. So it also is a major shopping corridor. This is what Broadway looks like on the from street level. You can see the landscape median in the middle with the pedestrian islands and the benches that are there. There are vents for the subway underneath, so the subway runs below, and you can see the apartment buildings on either side and the stores also lining either side, and the many trees that are here. And this is really the central point of the neighborhood. This is where people who live in this neighborhood go to shop. This is the main area where you find good stores, good grocery stores, as well as clothing stores, and banks and local services. And sometimes bicyclists fight against traffic. The person who was most transformative for New York City streets in more the present time is a woman, Jeanette Sadiq Khan, who was the head of our Department of Transportation under a previous mayor, Bloomberg, from 2007 to 2013. And she was radical in her approach to streets. And you see her sitting here in Times Square for a photograph for an article in Esquire magazine. To Ms. Sadiq Khan, she started the term of a road diet. That is, she asked her agency to do traffic counts of all major streets, particularly in Manhattan. And where they saw that traffic was actually low, and the street was wide, they actually decided to take away lanes from traffic, from vehicles, and to start using them for people. And so they found that areas of Broadway, sections of Broadway in Midtown Manhattan, were actually fairly lightly traveled. And so they used simple methods like putting up planters and stanchions and painting the asphalt a different color, including a bicycle lanes, as a way of stealing away roadway space from cars and handing them over to people. And this has been truly transformative for much of these sections of Midtown Manhattan, but also around other parts of New York City. We use this system of road diet and traffic calming much more widely now in New York. And the most famous example was her transformation of Times Square. This was something actually fairly radical. I am told that there was very little consultation with her superiors, with the mayor, when she decided to close off Times Square. This is the earliest image that I could find of this section of Times Square. This is 7th Avenue. Actually, this is Broadway at 42nd Street. This is the center of Times Square, and you can see the very simple way that this experiment in closing off this major thoroughfare in Manhattan. And the transportation department had done a study of how much traffic there was, where it was going, and what would happen if you did close off sections of Times Square to traffic, how the traffic would divert. And it was initially termed an experiment for just 6 months. Well, it was immediately accepted by pedestrians, by people in the city, by tourists. And today it has become a permanent fixture. Broadway between 42nd Street and 44th Street have become a giant living room, an outdoor living room, where tourists and office workers alike are able to gather outside and celebrate the fact that they are in a safe environment from cars and can enjoy the center of New York City. And it's that sort of similar kind of daring that the transportation department used the pandemic in 2020 to start closing off streets on a temporary basis to allow pedestrian use during the height of the pandemic, to allow residents to go out of their homes back in the days when we were all told to stay at home, not go to work, not go outside unless necessary. And so the city embarked upon an open streets program to close off streets to cars, and especially on weekends, and to allow people to be outside, to do this on weekends, but also in the evenings as people got home or wanted to stretch their legs. And another initiative was the Open Restaurants program, which allowed restaurants to expand outside to allow people to be more, to patronize, to go to a restaurant and to be safer by being outside. And then finally, the city took away a lane of traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge and dedicated it to bicycles, as well as creating bus lanes throughout the city on major corridors, while during the pandemic, car traffic was very little. So taking advantage of a crisis to improve and increase the ability for alternative transit as well as for pedestrians, and to make our city much more livable. So the next to last project I wanted to share with you is one that I've been involved in, the last two that I've been involved in myself. This is East New York in Brooklyn, and it is about Atlantic Avenue. So East New York is a neighborhood in Eastern Brooklyn, which is a very poor neighborhood, but and I've been actually was the planner for it originally when I started work at my agency. And I chose this neighborhood because I had done a planning studio as part of my studies when I was in college at Pratt Institute. But this area was part of a neighborhood plan that we created in our with the community and the elected officials that will result over time in over 6,000 apartments, about half of which we believe will be affordable to lower income people, with a new schools, new elementary, middle school, a new landscape median, a new Atlantic Avenue, parks, a youth center, and a job training center. Here's some pictures of what East New York's main streets look like. That's an image of Atlantic Avenue, Pitkin Avenue, where you actually have a subway line running below Fulton Street, which is also has an elevated subway line, and some of the typical side streets. And we had developed a plan here, a planning framework, and a plan with the community, and identified strategic improvements throughout the neighborhoods to either improve open space or develop recreational programs or improve economic development. And this was our vision for Atlantic Avenue in 2016. And one of the things that I am most proud of is the work that we did along Atlantic Avenue. And I have some more images of this. Atlantic Avenue, hold on, let me show you. So this is a part of the Department of Transportation. They identified this stretch of Atlantic Avenue as what they called a opportunity for a great street. And if you can look at these images of before, Atlantic Avenue was pretty dismal. It had this very low median, and the zoning on either side here actually did not allow any housing. It was still industrially zoned, with only fast food and a few restaurants and gas stations. It was a divider between the neighborhoods to the north and the south. It was also a place where many pedestrians were often involved in crashes. We call them crashes. So they were either hurt, or many also killed, or there were car crashes, car-to-car crashes, because the median was low and cars made strange turns across the median, or illegal U-turns to get from one side to the other. So we worked with our colleagues at the Transportation Department to convert Atlantic Avenue into a boulevard. We, even though there is a railroad running below the street, the Transportation Department was able to come to an agreement with the railroad below to install a raised median and fill it with soil and landscaping, and to plant it, as well as to plant trees on the side of the road. And this is the part that I'm really most proud of. This is a park that was alongside the highway. When we walked by here, there were people standing in the sun, waiting for a bus. And here you can see there is no shelter here. I hope eventually they will put in a bus shelter, but at least there is seating here at the bus stop. And you can see that the sidewalk has been extended into the street to allow for less distance for a pedestrian to cross the street, so to make it safer. And then in the middle of the street, there is this pedestrian safety island that allows people to stop in case they're slower, they couldn't make the light without being in danger. And actually, you can see in the background, one of the new apartment buildings, it's actually a all affordable new apartment building. Maybe I'll go back and you can see it there. So this is when we changed the street, we also changed the zoning along the street on both sides to allow for middle density. This is to us middle density housing in that area. And this was one of the first fully affordable apartment buildings to have been built, and it's already occupied. The last project that I wanted to share with you is another one that I also worked on. It's called Gowanus in Brooklyn, and I want to particularly draw your attention to the Gowanus Canal. So this is an old neighborhood, an industrial neighborhood in Brooklyn that is centered around an old industrial canal with industrial uses still remaining on either side, but a lot of vacancy and a very strong, very affluent, rich white neighborhoods surrounding it. And the area has slowly been turning into also an entertainment district. So you have breweries, restaurants, and you have rock wall climbing and shuffleboard and those kinds of things that actually address the needs of the surrounding community. And so we did a planning project here together with the community and the local council member, the local elected officials, to envision what could we do about what would we do to improve and change this area of Brooklyn. And so this was actually a website that we had put together that allowed people to put in individual comments like, I'd like to see more trees here. I want to have access to the water. I'd like there to be a better streets here, or I want it to be safer. And so we were really impressed by that response, and we used it a lot to inform our recommendations. The Gowanus Canal, if you think about it, acts almost like a street. It is not accessible to pedestrians. It has limited points at which you can cross it, but we use it and we actually mandate in New York City that if you build along the water, that you must provide access to the public along the water's edge. And so we worked very hard on urban design principles to guide the design of the waterfront, as well as the buildings that line the canal, so that there was a variance in the architecture and the expressions possible, but there are also certain principles maintained of what we call street wall and setbacks, as well as stepping down to the nearby neighborhoods. And so here are some images of the principles that you can see where we allow towers to be in different locations and to set back, but keeping certain principles in place. And then this was our vision for what a build out here eventually might look like with new residential buildings on either side this landscape waterfront. There's another one that actually spells out some of these urban design principles about buildings setting back, about buildings also aligning with the streets and allowing for articulation of facades to make it a more interesting and attractive streetscape. That concludes my presentation. So thank you. Okay, now I have to figure out how to stop sharing.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Winston. It was really great. Thanks for your effort to putting this all together into this presentation. I mean, it's for us, it's so important to have this input from you because we are working on a similar positioned assignment of converting a highway into like an urban highway into an urban boulevard. And this was so inspired. We are so inspired by you and your experience. Thank you very much for this really good input. I would like to, first of all, I mean, are there some questions already in the chat? If not, I mean, I would like to encourage everybody here to ask questions, to ask Winston. I mean, it's a good opportunity actually. I mean, I don't know how often we have such an opportunity to speak to such a really important urban planner here. Also, we have Sina here, and we invited her to give a little bit of a response. What does it mean for the Dominican Republic? What can we learn from this? Actually,
Well,
Sina is raising her hand. Yes.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you, Winston. Thank you very much. I love it. I didn't know you had a river in Brooklyn, or neither of that canal. I don't know that much New York City, but mainly Manhattan. But the first thing is there is hope. I think that was a whole methodology that was shared by many countries, in which at some point in time, getting from point A to point B the fastest way possible by car or vehicle was like a priority of our governments. And we do have various of those, I don't call them streets, they're like viaducts, viaductos, and they're almost a highway within the city. Some are elevated, some are at a street level or combined. And the one experience Roland is talking about that's been chosen, it's one boulevard that was built in 1992, and it actually cut in two sectors of the city which were very close to each other, Villa Juana and Villa Consuelo, and actually it ruptured them. They did build some apartment buildings, but you see them, most of them, there's no life towards the avenue. It's almost empty. It looks actually insecure. You have like 4 lanes and they're usually empty. But the thing is, like, you get from 3 lanes on each side, and then you jump onto 3 lanes going up, and then there's another lane that comes in at street level. So there's a whole like 2 kilometers that are with 4 lanes, barely traffic, speeding. Everyone's speeding. Everyone tries to go as fast as possible through that area, but it has a lot of potential. I think it does have potential to reconvert. And the good thing is that we have a metro system underneath with 2 stops at least, but they're very, people do not use them that much. And just one of the settlements is, I mean, the one with the metro entry is the one who uses the metro. The other one, they hardly cross. It's way too dangerous. It wasn't thought about. It wasn't designed for this other settlement just to cross. It's like a huge fence in between the two settlements. So I think there's a whole lot of potential to work with the planners and the students and on this process that Roland and his team, Teresa and everyone is just beginning to address.
May I just react to what you said?
Yes,
did
please.
You use the word rupture.
Yes.
That is a great word. I love that word. I think we've all experienced this where somebody just looking at a map, connect two points with a road without thinking about what is on either side, right? Just looking at this axis without looking in the other axis. And so you burst the neighborhood, you rupture that neighborhood. Roland showed me, we were talking about Santo Domingo, we were talking about this roadway, and I look at it and, forgive me, but as a planner, I look at this as an area of opportunity. There is so much potential here to make something out of it, especially if you have a metro line below that you can use the spaces for housing, for jobs, for recreation. And again, to use a road, you can use a road to divide a neighborhood, but you could also use a road like I tried to show with Broadway on the Upper West Side in Manhattan as a way of bringing the neighborhood together. This is where people come together. And that was, the plan for Atlantic Avenue this is where eventually we hope people will come together and feel safe and not find that crossing the street is such a big deal.
Yeah, the locals also refer to it as the herida urbana. It's like how would you say in English? How would you the herida? What's it? A wound. So it's like what would that be in English?
A wound, yeah.
Yeah, like
a roundabout.
Well, a wound, like
what is it in German?
Eine Wunde.
Eine Wunde.
Oh, a wound.
Wound, yeah.
Wound, yeah, sorry.
Not so different.
Yes. So I also imagine that we can find a lot of new uses when this street just cuts through everything, and it leaves a lot of spaces left over. It's like triangle spaces or a lot of public spaces that are not used at all, and we could give new life to them and the meaning to them. For example, with recreational uses, but also commercial uses maybe. In Latin America, commercial uses always tend to be like uncontrolled, informal commercial uses, and then it's just the opposite of great, because it's done too much. But actually, I think if we manage to organize the area well, also with a light design and to bring new life, and I think it will increase also security in the area. And don't forget about the metro stations there. So so every 800 meters or 1 kilometer is a train station. I think we are a little limited with the green spaces, but also we could find some solutions to bring more green spaces there. Have one lane less. Yeah. We don't know yet if bicycle is such a requirement, bicycle use in Dominican Republic, because it's also a matter of the heat, and but even that could be tried.
But the mayor is going, it's going for it. A former mayor and this mayor, they're both working, promoting the use of bicycles. A lot of people are afraid because of the climate, because of the speeding reality on the streets, but more and more people are using, first as a recreation mode, but also you see a lot of some professionals, but a lot of workers that are using bicycles to go to construction sites or to work around, especially if you have like short distances and you're going east-west and you don't have to go up a hill in one of the terraces. It's a good alternative.
Right.
See?
And actually, Sina, you remind me, the new president of Brooklyn, we have these presidents of the boroughs, is Antonio Reynoso, who is from the Dominican Republic as well. And he's a big bicyclist. He loves bicycles, so I would hope that it's because of his experience in the Dominican Republic. But yeah, I think people will, if you, I think one of the things that I've realized in New York City, that if you build safe bicycle lanes, they will come. If you build it, they will come. If you provide it, and you make it comfortable and safe, I think it's a great way of designing a street. I wonder if it's a student's bicycle. Do any of the students' bicycle?
Victoria.
So what? We don't use it like too much. It's something like recreational, not going to the university or going to work. It's something that is now we are trying to do it, but when I talk with my students about what do you think about going by bike to the university, the common is always like there's a lot of sun. We are going to be sweating. What is going to happen when we go there? And we're going to smell what? And I just all the time I say, like, if you go to the gym before going to the university, you sweat also, but then you take a shower. So if you have showers in the university, why not? You can like came here by bike and then to take a shower, but it's also it's hard. We have to change the chip and start thinking about what does need the city to have, and not only the city but the university and the working places, and like we have to improve the infrastructure to have it. Like, we need shadows, we need showers in the university, we need shadows in the street, maybe to start thinking about not to thinking about the only way to go through the city is by car. Like we have different ways to do it, and the public transportation is a good way too, and they are working on getting better solutions now, and it's something that we cannot work from one side. Is something that we have to working from different sides, and it's a collaboration with central government and local government, because the city doesn't have the control of the transportation, for example, or the city what happens on the streets. So it's hard, but I think there's hope. So, and it starts in the university, when we can change this chip since classroom to start thinking about different ways to make intervention in the city, and to how can we live the city differently. And interventions like yours, like you have done in the New York, is like it's refreshing, because we can see that it could happen. Cars are not the main actor in the city. Like we citizens are the main participant in the city. So we need to claim our paper like here, and we need to ask for this right we have to use the city. And thank you for your intervention and your ideas and your project, because it's refreshing to us.
Can I ask a question? And I apologize for not having done my own research, but is Santo Domingo growing in population?
It's growing on population, but more in surface, like 8 kilometers per year in surface.
It's growing outward.
Yes.
Rather than growing in. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, let's see. We have a census this year. We hope we have a census this year, so we'll be able to know what's precisely what's going on. After 12 years, we're going to have a census. But the national district, like the city center, it's going up, but it's also expelling the lower income groups, because it's getting more and more expensive. So you have that growth that Victoria says, it's like in the periphery or outwards. There's an incentive for middle income housing, but the national district is very expensive for most people. So affordable housing and urban redevelopment, it's a necessity. We do have a lot of informal settlements with very poor conditions, even in the national district.
I mean, I would think that this road with the metro below would be perfect, right, for mixed income housing.
It is.
Right, because it allows, right, if you're poor or low income, the metro is probably your best, cheapest way of going to work.
And even for higher income groups, if we could get everywhere with the metro, it's a very dignified transportation system, and it works perfectly. So anyone who has the chance to get around with the metro, with the stations that we do have and the 2 lanes, a lot of people can use it. But it's the difficulty arriving to the stations. Like we don't have yet a good system of buses that can actually take people to the stations. Mm-hmm. So that's one difficulty, but it's a very good way of transportation.
I mean, I would also say though that you can, besides buses bringing people to the station, if you build up.
That's what's missing.
Yeah, the housing near it, right? Mm-hmm. And behind it even, right? Not just on it, but that you're able to make better use. You create more supply of passengers, of customers, as they call them here, for the trains. That's great.
Santo Domingo, in this area that we are working, is already dense. I'm just wondering if more density around the train stations would be possible. Do you think that there's some potential there, or do you think that we don't have the green spaces, for example, around that are also needed, and the infrastructure, or like equipamiento, like the social infrastructure, schools and so on? What do you think? Is it possible to make it more dense, or are we already in the peak?
No, we have some settlements around that are like single housing, like in Sánchez Luperón. It's still single housing, but Villa Juana has a lot of commercial and a lot of residential. But because you have some, Villa Consuelo is mainly commercial, so it has expelled a lot of its population. You have a lot of voids. Actually, you even look at empty buildings. We have to find a strategy to have people coming back to those apartments, because we have empty apartments there. We will have to make a thorough investigation of how about housing. For instance, the mayor has City Hall has a market in Villa Consuelo. and they don't sell at low prices. They actually have high prices. And when you ask them, they say, well, we have very few clients because everyone around here, everything is commercial. So we have very few clients. So Villa Consuelo, it's a concentration of small little industries and a lot of informal commercial activity. So I think if we go through it, we could find new opportunities. We have a lot of one-story and two-story housing, but along this highway, we do have four-story high apartment buildings originally. But even the first floors that were supposed to be commercial, they're empty or they're closed.
That's contradictory to having a metro line, because if you build a new metro here in Austria, in Vienna, the housing prices, they double because it's just.
But think that the avenue and the buildings were built in 1992, and the metro was built in 2008. So there is they were not. It was not a package.
Mm-hmm. Sure, but it could be transformed in the next 20 years and could be made more efficient, let's say.
I think so. Yes, there is the potential.
Mm-hmm.
I think Victoria worked on something around one of the metro stations.
Yes, for the city plan, we worked in 2015, maybe. We was thinking about making a TOD around metro station in Agora. In Agora is one important station near from the central city, and then in a point when two lines are crossed, we plan something about like a TOD, but it's just an idea. We didn't develop it. We just put like in the plan. It should be thinking about putting more density and working about making more public spaces around the stations and making them important points on the city, not only because of the metro stations, but also because of the use that they have around, like they should have around.
Mm.
I would, Roland, and I would encourage you and the students and everybody to either I always like when they say, "Oh, we're already dense," right? But it's that example of the glass with the rocks in it, and it's this glass full, and yes, and then you pour sand on it, and it says, "Is it full?" And yes, and then you pour water on it, and is it full? Now it's full. So there's always room. Just stupid example, but there's always. I feel like. One of the things that I think in the example for the Sheridan Expressway, right, where we took away lanes, we narrowed the street and we created development sites or land on either side of the highway, or either land for housing or land for open space or for other transportation uses other than cars. And there's also, I know it's not popular, but there's also the regeneration of buildings, right? You take buildings and maybe the 4-story building or the 2-story building is replaced with a bigger building. You change it. And, I was showing that in the example in East New York with that one apartment building. It's the first one of its kind, and after a while, we expect all the smaller houses, smaller buildings, many of them, to be replaced with larger ones. And to Sina's concern about low-income housing, we have what we call inclusionary housing, where when we rezone for higher density, we require the inclusion of affordable housing, low-income housing in the new housing, so that between 20% or 30% has to be set aside as permanent low-income housing.
Winston, one question. That low-income housing is for rent?
It is. It's most of the time it's rent. There is a program for home ownership, but it is more complicated to do when it's done by the private sector. Home ownership is always more complicated because it requires you to have income, not just to have income, but to have assets to put down. Whereas low-income housing, rental housing, is really ability to start building wealth towards buying something.
Mm-hmm.
It's also more expensive for the city to subsidize home ownership.
Okay, so do we have more questions to Winston? Maybe we can ask, there were some comments from the students, but actually none of the students spoke up, so maybe we have at least one person speaking. So who would that be?
Can I suggest that?
Yes.
I saw one comment. It's not there, but I saw it fly across the screen. It was somebody said that they were impressed that there was such a powerful woman in New York City who made a difference, right? And yes, and more power to her. So I'll put her name in the chat. So that if you're interested in finding out more about her, right? She now works for Bloomberg, the company, together with another woman who was the head of our planning department. And I see there is a question there. There you go. There you go. There is a question, Roland, that I see. That's to the student, maybe.
Well, I was making them, like forcing them to participate, but I will make the question by myself. Something that comes up when I talk about like the taking these lanes off for the pedestrian, not for the cars. What happened with the traffic? Because of the time we think like, we can make the streets wider for the pedestrian, but not for the cars. We're taking out the cars of the city, but even if we have public transportation, we still have the necessity to move by car, like for most part of the city. So what happened when we are trying to take the car off the city? What happened with the traffic?
So for the project on Times Square, they did an analysis of where the traffic would go otherwise, right? Where people are driving, when they're driving. And remember, most of the traffic is through. It's not to the neighborhood. It's going through. It's connecting. And then, it worked out. The traffic is still, I would say the traffic congestion in Times Square is the same now as it was before. It didn't change. It's just that what I think happened is that people either find other ways of getting around or they give up. They stop. And I once spoke with a transportation planner, and I said, what was your question? What happens, right? And he was very sort of mellow. He said, they go down one street and they get stuck in traffic. The next time they go down that street and they get stuck in traffic again. The next time they'll find a different way. They'll go somewhere else. And eventually right, people give up, right? And in New York City, we've learned you could build incredibly wide streets, right, to accommodate the traffic. But once people see the really wide street, like, oh, I can drive now, and they start driving, right? So it's by constricting it, you make it really, for those who really absolutely have to drive, and for the others, it's still eventually there's a natural balance. I'm not a transportation planner, but there's a certain amount of congestion that you almost can accept. But if I may, the other way around, right? We talked about doing the analysis of how heavily trafficked is the street, and if it's, we have level of service that goes from A to F, and A is, no traffic at all. F is completely stopped, and the planners usually try to go for level of service C, right, or with minor delays, a little bit, right? And so they looked at all the streets that were level of service C and better, A or B, right? And they said, if we take away a lane, then A goes to B or B goes to C, right? That's an opportunity. Let's do that. Right, so they use the opposite way, which is like they're not using that street all the time, so let's constrict it. Let's use that as a way of, if there are 3 lanes, but you only need 2, then take away one of those lanes.
Yeah, street diet. Yeah, I like that. Mm-hmm. Street diet, and the other one thing was. Urban living room. That is, I like these words a lot, because this tells a lot about this narrative that we can construct. We can convert something which is a totally neglecting area into a livable area, and bring the neighborhoods to life again through activating these, let's say, spaces that are left over and could be reclaimed for pedestrians and maybe even bike users. So I think that this was very important for us, this talk, because we will go to Santo Domingo next week. Yeah, and Winston, if you like, you are also invited. Yeah, still. So if
I would love to. I would love to. It's too short notice, but that would be great.
Mm-hmm. Actually, we took Winston to the Bahamas some years back, and it worked out pretty well. But it was different times, right? It was no pandemic in our back. But yes, but we will go there. We will have this planning workshop with the municipality, with the community there, and we will think of solutions how to integrate this herida, this wound, bring it back to life and reanimate a little bit. And maybe we find a little motivation to do also some TUD concepts, because we believe that this is actually it's one integrated part of an intervention, because the densification is not done by the public sector. It's done by the private sector. It's done by the people allowed to build more. If they own land. And they get more through the zoning, because there is a new train station or there is a new metro line. And that means this urban development will be triggered by this private sector. So we could think of defining a zone where this.
And Roland, can I just say that's a good thing, right? I mean. The dense part, the densification part, right? Putting, we talked about bicycles a lot, but don't discount pedestrians and mass transit. A dense neighborhood allows more services to be in closer distance to residents. So less need to take a car or even a metro or to bicycle. You can walk. And densification is therefore about sustainability. Right? If you can prevent people from moving outside where you need a car, and you can get them to come inside, even the wealthy, if they would live inside the city and take the subway together, the metro together with everybody else, or the bus or a bicycle or walk, that increases sustainability. It's the reason why I asked whether Santo Domingo is growing. It's best to grow around the metro. And right, so allowing for more density is absolutely a good thing. We struggle with that everywhere around the world. People don't like to hear that taller buildings are coming to their neighborhood. They think taller buildings and bigger buildings mean that the neighborhood is gentrifying, is becoming richer. But it is, if you mix it with low-income housing, it can be a good thing.
Yeah, it's a mixture of social stratus. It's always good.
Yeah.
So, Victoria, it's here in Vienna. It's 9 o'clock, so we have already 2 hours. I don't know. The last time we talked for 3 hours, it was maybe too long.
It was too long.
Yes. So I would suggest to wrap it up, and I give the word to you, Victoria. I just thank again, Vincent, that you took your time, 2 hours of your valuable time. We are very, very happy to have you with us. And yeah, we will report from Santo Domingo. Yeah, I give the work back to Victoria.
Okay. Thank you very much for Winston to show us that refreshing examples of what could happen in Santo Domingo in the future. Hopefully, in a closer future, like those years. And for my students, chicos, yo les digo que miren cómo se puede usar la calle. No es solo qué pasa con poner la acera más amplia o poner árboles, sino que también quitar carriles, desmontar los elevados. Es necesario pensar que hay otra forma posible, que no hay que ser tímidos con las intervenciones, que otra forma es posible, que si se ha logrado en otras ciudades, es aprender qué mecanismos han sido necesarios para importarlos y llevarlos a un entorno local aplicable, por supuesto. Entonces, I think that we can say goodbye to everyone and see you in our next opportunity. Winston, I hope you can go to Dominican Republic to give us a very good ideas like you showed us today.
And come to New York, and I'll be happy to welcome you here as well. I would love to come to Dominican Republic, and I don't know if Claudia is there now. I believe she was.
I don't know. We'll have to find out. I think she's working in Chicago, I think.
Yes, you're right. She is. But maybe we can do a reunion.
Yes. We can invite her.
That's right.
She comes back and forth every so and so.
It's been a real pleasure to see you all. And very nice to meet you, Sina and Victoria, as well.
Very nice meeting you, Winston. A pleasure.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Good luck to the students.